There is a specific kind of quiet that settles over you after you leave a family that was never really safe. It is not the quiet of peace. It is the quiet of someone who has been holding their breath for so long that silence starts to feel like the only language they know. You know this quiet. You have probably lived inside it for years, maybe decades, without ever having a name for it, without ever knowing that the heaviness sitting in your chest every time someone asks, "How was your family growing up?" is not just nostalgia, it is grief. But it is a grief that nobody gives you a card for. Nobody sends flowers for this one. Because here is the thing nobody tells you when you finally walk away from a family that hurt you. The leaving does not end the hurting. Sometimes, in ways that are almost impossible to explain to someone who has not lived it, the leaving is where the real pain begins. Take a breath with that for a moment. You left. You were supposed to feel free. So, why does it feel like you are still carrying all of them inside you, everywhere you go? There are patterns you have probably noticed in yourself, small ones. The way you apologize even when you are not wrong. The way you check the energy in a room the second you walk in, before you have even taken off your coat, scanning for tension the way a soldier scans for threats. The way you shrink yourself when someone raises their voice, even slightly, even if it has nothing to do with you. The way you over-explain yourself in emails, in conversations, in text messages, adding layer upon layer of justification, as if the other person is already angry at you, as if you are already on trial. You do this, and then you wonder why you are so exhausted. You give people more than they ask for, more than they need, more than is reasonable. And you do it not out of generosity, but out of something that feels closer to self-protection. If you make yourself useful enough, if you stay small enough, if you manage everyone else's emotions carefully enough, then maybe nothing bad will happen. Maybe no one will leave. Maybe no one will explode. Maybe you will be safe for one more day. This is not a personality trait. This is a survival strategy that worked once. And that is the tragedy of it, really. Every single behavior that now makes your adult life harder was once the exact right response to an environment that was unpredictable, or cold, or rageful, or subtly invalidating. Your nervous system learned what it needed to learn in order to get you through, and it got you through. You are here, after all. But the strategy is still running. Long after the original danger has passed, your body and your mind are still playing the same game, in rooms where nobody is keeping score. Psychologists have a word for what happens when a child is placed, consciously or not, in the role of emotional caretaker for one or both parents. They call it parentification. But before we get to the word, let us just sit inside the experience for a moment, because the word alone does not capture what it actually felt like. It felt like being the one who always knew what mood the house was in. It felt like adjusting your footsteps on the staircase based on sounds coming from the kitchen. It felt like learning to read your parents' face the way other children learn to read books, studying every micro-expression for signs of whether today would be okay or not. It felt like being the one who held their sadness, absorbed their anxiety, reflected back whatever they needed to see because you intuitively understood, even at age 7 or 8 or 9, that the cost of getting it wrong was enormous. And somewhere in that process, something important happened. You stopped being a child and started being a function. Not because you were unloved. Some of you were loved. Some of you had parents who meant well, who were simply too broken themselves to know what a child actually needed. Some of you had parents who were physically present, but emotionally somewhere else entirely, grieving a marriage or drowning in their own unprocessed childhoods. Some had parents who were openly cruel. Some had parents who were neither cruel nor kind, just absent in the way that leaves a specific kind of cold. Every single version of this creates the same wound. A child who learns that their needs are secondary. A child who learns that the way to stay safe is to become indispensable to someone else's emotional world. Parentification is the clinical term, but what it really means is this. You grew up being the adult in a room full of adults, and no one ever told you that was not your job. Here is where it gets more complicated, because the obvious consequence, the one people talk about, is that you end up in adult relationships where you overgive, where you become the emotional caretaker again, where you attract people who need you to carry them. And yes, that happens. That is real. But there is a layer beneath that one that people talk about far less. When you grow up being someone else's emotional regulator, you never quite develop a felt sense of your own inner life. You become so attuned to what other people are feeling that you lose track of what you are feeling. You become an expert at reading the room and a stranger to your own interior. You can tell within 30 seconds of a conversation whether someone is uncomfortable, whether they need reassurance, whether they are pulling away or getting closer. But ask you what you actually want, what you need, what you genuinely feel in this moment. And there is often a strange blankness, a pause that goes on too long. This is not numbness exactly. It is more like a long habit of prioritizing the emotional landscape of others so thoroughly that your own inner world became a kind of background static, something to manage or suppress rather than listen to. The unexpected twist is this: the very empathy that everyone around you probably admires, the sensitivity, the attunement, the way you just always seem to know what someone needs, that same gift is also the wound. Because it was not born from abundance. It was born from necessity. It was the skill you developed, not in a world that was generous and safe, but in a world where reading people correctly was the price of belonging. And so even when you leave the family, the skill comes with you. It comes with you into every job, every friendship, every romantic relationship. You keep earning your place in rooms where you were always already welcome. Breath. You were always already welcome. You just never believed it. Now, we arrive at the place in this story that is the hardest to say out loud. You left. Or maybe you created distance, set limits, stopped answering every call, stopped showing up to every gathering that left you feeling hollowed out for days. And people, possibly including people within the family itself, called that cold, called that selfish, called that an overreaction, asked you why you could not just let it go, told you that family is family, told you that one day you would regret it, told you that you were too sensitive, that you were rewriting history, that things were not that bad. And here is the cruelest part of all of it. Some of you believed them. You left a family that hurt you. And then you spent years quietly prosecuting yourself for the leaving. You grieved them, which is normal. And then you told yourself the grief was proof that you had made a mistake. You miss them because of course you miss them. Love is not rational, and the body does not know the difference between missing and mourning. And then you use that missing as evidence against your own lived experience. You thought, if it was really that bad, why do I still love them? You thought, maybe I am the problem. Maybe I am asking for too much. Maybe my bar is too high. Maybe I am fundamentally too broken to belong anywhere. That is not a conclusion you reach through clear thinking. That is a conclusion you were trained to reach. Because a family system that needs you to stay small, that needs you to carry their emotions, that needs you to never hold them accountable will also, in ways both obvious and subtle, teach you to distrust your own perceptions, to question your own memory, to doubt the validity of your own pain. Psychologists call this gaslighting when it is intentional, but it does not have to be intentional to leave the same mark. A parent who genuinely believes they never did anything wrong is still teaching you that your experience of what they did is untrustworthy. And so you learned at a cellular level to look to others to tell you what was real. The grief of leaving a family that was never safe is layered in a way that almost no other grief is. There is the grief of what happened, the specific incidents, the cold words, the absences, the moments when you needed someone and the room was empty. There is the grief of what did not happen, the childhood you did not get, the attunement nobody offered, the person you might have become if you had grown up in a house where it was safe to take up space. There is the grief of what you hoped for, because even people who leave families that hurt them usually spent years, sometimes decades, hoping that something would shift, hoping that this Christmas would be different, that if they just tried harder, communicated better, loved more carefully, something would finally click into place and the family they always needed would somehow materialize out of the one they were given. And then there is the grief that no one names, the one that sits at the very bottom of all the others. The grief of accepting that some families cannot give you what you need, not because you are unworthy of it, but because they do not have it to give. That sentence, let it sit somewhere in your chest for a moment. They did not withhold love from you because you were not enough. They could not give what they did not have. This does not excuse the harm. It does not erase anything, but it opens a small door, just a crack, to the possibility of understanding the difference between someone who failed you and someone who chose to fail you. Sometimes the distinction matters. Sometimes it changes nothing. You get to decide what to do with it. Here is where the story asks something of you, not as a demand, not as a prescription, but as a quiet question. What if the leaving was not the end of something? What if it was the beginning of something you do not have a map for yet? Because here is what walking away from a harmful family system actually creates. Underneath all the grief, underneath all the guilt, underneath all the mourning of a relationship that was never quite what you needed it to be. Space. Just space. And space is terrifying when you have spent your entire life filling it with someone else's emotional needs, with their anxieties and their expectations and their unspoken rules. When the space opens up and suddenly no one is asking you to perform, no one is asking you to manage, no one is handing you their emotional weight to carry, the first thing you might feel is not freedom. The first thing you might feel is nothing. And then, slowly, something else begins to surface. Something quieter. Something that has been trying to get your attention for a very long time. Yourself. There is an image from the field of inner child work, a concept developed by psychologist John Bradshaw, and later expanded by many others, that describes a part of you that was frozen at the age when things first went wrong. This part of you is not metaphorical. It lives in the way your body responds to certain tones of voice. It lives in the way your face goes blank when someone criticizes you in a particular way. It lives in the way you still, even now, sometimes wait for permission to want things. The work, if you choose it, is not about going back. It is not about revisiting every painful moment in forensic detail. It is about learning, slowly, in small moments, to meet that younger part of you with something they never received from the people who were supposed to provide it. Simple, uncomplicated, presence. Not because you have to earn it, not because you managed anyone else's pain well enough to deserve it, just because you exist, just because you are here. The shame of having left, or of wanting to leave, or of having complicated feelings about a family that also, in some ways, you love. That shame is worth examining very gently, because shame, in this context, is often the last loyalty. It is the part of you that still believes that if you hold yourself responsible for the estrangement, if you stay in the role of the difficult one, the oversensitive one, the one who caused all this trouble by refusing to pretend that everything was fine, then at least the family narrative stays intact. At least someone is at fault. At least the story makes sense. Giving up that shame means giving up the familiar story. And the familiar story, even when it hurts you, is still a story you know. The unknown is something else entirely. But here is what lives on the other side of that shame. Not innocence, not the clean slate of having never been hurt or having never hurt anyone, not the fairy tale version of your own history, just the truth. Complicated, layered, non-linear. The truth that you were a child who needed more than you got. The truth that the people who were supposed to provide it were doing the best they could, and sometimes their best was not enough. And both of those things are simultaneously real. The truth that you are allowed to grieve the family you needed and never had, even if you love the family you were given. The truth that these two realities are not in conflict. You can love someone and still protect yourself from them. You can grieve a relationship and still know that leaving was right. You can wish things had been different and still refuse to pretend they were not what they were. There is a kind of person you might be in the process of becoming. You probably cannot see them very clearly yet, because becoming is not a destination, it is a direction. But there are signs of them already. In the moments when you catch yourself saying no to something, and noticing that the sky does not fall. In the moments when you feel an emotion, and instead of immediately asking yourself whether it is appropriate, whether you are too much, whether it is going to inconvenience someone, you simply let it be there. In the moments when someone is kind to you, and instead of immediately wondering what they want in return, there is a small, tentative opening in you that says, quietly, maybe this is just what it is. Those moments are not small. They feel small, but they are the exact opposite of small. Maybe I am allowed to take up space. Maybe the love I give myself counts. Maybe the grief is not a sign that I was wrong. Maybe it is just a sign that I loved something that could not love me back the way I needed. Maybe walking away from what hurt me is the most honest thing I have ever done. You came into this world already whole, not perfect, not finished, but whole in the way that all living things are whole at the beginning, in possession of an interior life that deserved to be met with curiosity and warmth and steady presence. Some of you got that, and still ended up here, because life is not a clean equation, and even the best childhoods leave marks. Some of you did not get that at all. Some of you got the opposite, and somewhere along the way, in a house that was yours, but never quite felt safe, you started to believe that the emptiness was inside you, that the coldness was yours, that the ache was a flaw and not a wound. It was a wound. Wounds do not make you broken. They make you someone who was hurt. There is a difference. The difference is everything. The family you lose to death or distance or simple time leaves a specific kind of hollow. It is the hollow of something that was there and is now gone, and the world notices, and there are rituals for it, and people understand. But the family you leave, or the family you grieve before they are even gone, because you finally see them clearly, and what you see is not safe enough for you anymore, that hollow is stranger. It sits in you sideways. People do not know what to say about it. Sometimes you do not know what to say about it. And yet, you are not the first person to sit in this particular darkness. There are others in it too, right now. at this exact moment, in rooms all over the world, in cities and small towns and apartments and houses with too many memories in the walls. People who loved a family they had to leave, who grieved something that did not die so much as it revealed itself for what it always was. You are not alone in this. You are in very quiet, very real company. Be real. There is a kind of belonging that you get to build now, slowly, on ground that you choose. Not the belonging of obligation, not the belonging of performing yourself into acceptability, not the belonging you earn by shrinking, the belonging of being known as you actually are, and having that be enough. You will not build it overnight. You will probably not build it in a straight line. There will be relationships where the old patterns resurface, where you find yourself shrinking and managing and earning again. And you will recognize it eventually, sometimes too late, and sometimes just in time. And recognizing it does not mean you have failed. It means the part of you that learned to survive in a difficult world is still trying to help, still trying to keep you safe, still doing the only job it ever knew. You can thank it for that. You can say, I see what you are doing. I remember why you learned to do it. And I am going to try something different now. The opening of this script began with a quiet, a particular kind of held breath quiet that settles after you have left something that was never safe. That quiet is still there. It may always be there in some form, but quiet is not only the absence of safety. Quiet can also be the first sound of something that finally has room to breathe. You carried a version of yourself through a childhood that did not always make space for you. You got it to adulthood. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, extraordinary. And somewhere in you, beneath all the patterns and the armor and the careful management of everyone else's world, the person you were before you learned to be small is still there, waiting, not with urgency, not with demands, just waiting, the way seeds wait in the quiet and the dark for enough warmth to begin.